Hi there, I am Ben Tucker with Bellingham Real Estate Company, and I'm here with Shay Shiefelbein of West Inspect, and we are going to talk about all things home maintenance.
Let's get started.
Let's go. What would you say are some of the most common areas of deferred maintenance that you see when you're inspecting homes?
I would say very common is going to be exterior related items. So it's going to be like your gutters are overflowing, they're dirty, caulking around windows on the outside, maybe neglected paint, kind of stuff like that. Also decks are a very popular one where we need to restain our planking or something similar to that. But mostly those kind of items, I would say, are the most common.
Okay, so a lot of items that are going to usually present themselves probably in the fall and winter, but things that we need to be thinking about in the summertime or the springtime.
Absolutely. Once spring gets here, it's a perfect time to kind of do some exterior maintenance, get those gutters cleaned, treat the moss on your roof, those kind of items, and just make sure everything is draining properly and kind of free and clear to do so.
Okay, awesome. And then as kind of part of the, I don't know if it's part of the inspector's job, but is it something where, when you notice these items of deferred maintenance, you're obviously giving advice on, what your client can do to address those in the future? Are you ever also giving, not advice, but referrals to other companies to help them out? Are there like trusted partners that you work with, or?
Typically, if I have personally worked with somebody or, get a great recommendation from somebody that I can definitely trust, I'm happy to pass that information along. Otherwise, I kind of leave it up to, whoever my client is just to do whatever, and call a few people, pick your favorite, that kind of a thing.
And so for interior items, is there anything that's been a common theme that you're seeing kind of house after house?
Yeah, interior, it's servicing your furnace annually. It's cleaning your dryer vent annually, or at least biannually, depending on how many people live in the home. Something as simple as this fireplace. Most manufacturers recommend every year to have it serviced. I cannot tell you how many times I look at a furnace and it's all fogged up and I can't see anything, and it's just never been serviced. So those are some simple things. Adjusting doors, making sure your window locks function correctly, those kind of easier items, I would say. Most of the other things, because it's interior based, people see it, so they're aware of it, and they make it happen a lot faster than, say, dirty gutters, or something like that.
But that doesn't mean that we don't put off doing it.
Sure, so. 100%. Yeah. I am also guilty of that, 100%.
When I moved into my house, one of the first things I noticed were these really old yellow smoke detectors, and I thought, these are probably pretty old, I should replace them. But is there a recommendation on how often we should be replacing a smoke detector or a battery?
Most manufacturers will say about 10 years. It can vary by manufacturer, of course, but if they're starting to be yellow or say they're beeping a lot, obviously the batteries are dying or are dead. But if it's discolored in any way, I just replace it.
Okay.
A really good rule of thumb that I tell most of my clients, when you move into a home, unless it is a brand new construction home or something similar, just get new smoke alarms, new CO detectors for the whole house. Start from zero, so you have fresh batteries and fresh units.
Okay, and I think that ran me about $500 in our house, so it wasn't crazy, and I think that we might have gotten combination with smoke and CO2, or excuse me, CO.
Yeah.
And is the kind of rule for replacement the same for a CO alarm? I imagine that it's still kind of a 10-year cycle for those things. Yeah,
it varies again by manufacturer. Like they all print them on the back, so it's like subjective to them. But yeah, give or take, if you're doing smoke alarms, just get a new CO detector. $15-20 is definitely worth your life. And it's not, you don't just have to put one per floor. That's just the standard in Washington. You can certainly do one per room, if you really want to be extra cautious or something like that.
Okay, and for the CO detectors, those are ones that they want you to have that outside of bedrooms, right?
No, we just need one per floor in Washington State. And again, like either CO companies, they'll say, hey, we want it up high, we want it down low, and it varies by, again, the manufacturer.
Okay.
But I just read what the package says, even though we all like to skip that. Just go read a quick line item and put it where it needs to go.
Okay. Another thing that I know that we need to pay attention to is the filters in our furnace. And so how often and why do we change that? But how often do we change it? What's the purpose for changing it? And where should we look to find that filter?
Sure. I would guess about every 3 months is a great rule of thumb just to start replacing your air filter, whether that's in a forced air furnace, A mini split heat pump, those you can actually clean, whereas typically when it comes to a gas furnace or electric furnace, you're going to be replacing the filter. There are many different kinds. Some are more robust than others, and they're reusable. But for the most part, I would say 80% of homes have cartridge paper filters that you replace about every 3 months. We have different ratings. We can go all the way from entry level to the top tier. And I think a good place, like I was saying, every 3 months, if you have any respiratory issues or any sort of, maybe pets or you're sensitive to something like that, you could do it once a month if you really want to be cautious, something like that.
And what's the effect, like let's just say we're not thinking about that, we go 2 years without changing that filter.
Yeah.
What can come from that?
So one of the effects, of course, is going to be a bit of indoor air quality. It's just not as clean as it can be. You're not going to be filtering out particulates from like pet hair or what have you. Another one is it's going to be putting extra stress on your blower motor in your furnace. Think of it like a hamster wheel that's spinning and kind of pushing air throughout your house. If it can't push the air through anything, it's got to be really kind of just going and pushing hard, and that'll prematurely wear it out. So, a $30, $40 filter can help with that.
Okay, so it's going to prolong the life of the unit, which is not a cheap unit to replace.
Absolutely not.
So it's probably a little more cost effective to just change a filter out every few months.
Yep, 100%.
So one other filter that I know we see a lot in houses anytime we have like an overhead range hood, or sometimes that's even a microwave that sits above a range and they're using that as the filtration system. How often should we be cleaning a filter like that? And is it the same kind of a process and the same kind of a filter that we'd find in something like a furnace?
I would say it's going to be definitely like user dependent. So if you're cooking with maybe heavy oily foods or something like that, it's probably going to be more often than somebody who isn't. I would err on the side of caution and just look at it maybe once a month, see if there's any grease buildup, anything like that. But your standard filters you'll find on like a microwave or something like that, really tightly woven metal. You can throw them in the dishwasher. You can wash them by hand with a little bit of mild soap and some water. When it comes to like a range hood, whether it's over the cooktop or maybe a higher end unit, those typically, sometimes you don't want to put them in the dishwasher because they'll get dented. So you'd probably take those off and wash them by hand.
Okay.
But I'd take a look at them once a month, once every 2 months, depending on how much you cook.
Just easy to visually inspect, and if it's dirty, you're going to see it.
You're totally going to see it. Put your finger on it. If it's really sticky and kind of gross, it's definitely time.
Okay. So springtime, what are the items outside the house that should be the first places that we want to look just to make sure that everything's in order and just kind of getting ready for the season?
Coming into spring, I would definitely prioritize your roof and gutter system. Over winter we get harsh winds, a lot of rain, even some snow. So, get on the roof, see if we have any moss accumulation, if we have any sort of damaged shingles, anything like that. Of course, if the gutters are dirty, sometimes you can see eroded soil below the area that's letting you know, hey, these gutters are blocked or something similar. At that point, I'd also start looking at like caulking around your windows, those kind of things, just to get a preemptive plan for summer. Okay. And really focus on the outside. So
a lot of things still kind of planning around water related.
Yeah, water related stuff, because spring around here, we're still going to get those big rainstorms here and there. And then when summer finally is here, we can really tackle some of those things more in depth on the outside. Spring is also a really good time to have an HVAC contractor come out, service your heating system, your cooling system, whether that's a heat pump or a furnace, something like that, just to get it ready going into the next season.
Awesome. And I know if you bundle those, for those of you that are going to do that service, if you want to do your like furnace, your water heater, your heat pump, and say even like your fireplace, getting that cleaned and looked over, you usually save money if you do all those at the same time.
Yeah, totally. And lots of contractors will offer discounts, even like, hey, spring forward, or all the other keywords, and they'll say like $150 off, or something like that. So yeah, it's a good time to take care of those items now.
Perfect. Talking summertime maintenance, I know we'd rather be out on the lake, playing with our friends, enjoying the sunshine, but there's some things that we should be conscious of as far as our house goes. So what are those items, you'd say like June, July, August, that, now it's time to pay attention to these items at the house?
Sure. I'd probably start prioritizing exterior, so like decks, siding, things like that. So in regards to decks, it would be like making sure the walking surface isn't wood decayed to where you're gonna step through it. All the planking is secured, things like that. If you have any boards that need to get stained or you're thinking of upgrading, now's a great time to do it, now that all the materials should be sufficiently dry to kind of take the stain or take the paint. And then once you kind of get the deck in order, I'd kind of prioritize your windows and any sort of penetration on the siding. Look for caulking, any sort of wood decay trim or anything like that. Kind of make a note of the location and come up with a plan to replace it.
Okay, so I know one thing that I'll talk a little bit more about just because we see it so often, because it's so wet here all the time, is that rot and that decaying wood. So is there anything when a homeowner is out looking at their house that they can kind of easily, spot that decay and just kind of how to identify if it is decay or if maybe it's just wet and it needs to dry out?
Sure. I would follow gravity. So look at the bottom corners of your window, look at where your deck connects to your house, or there's maybe a flat surface where water can hit it and then kind of splash outward. Those are usually the high wear areas, or any sort of an interesting, roof design or constriction in your siding that kind of funnels water to a specific location. Look in those weird areas too. Just make sure there's no hidden damage or anything. But one way to do it is go up to it. If you have some peeling paint or maybe some bubbling paint, put your thumb or finger on it. Don't push too hard because you don't want to go all the way through if it is, really rotten. But right then you're going to feel almost immediately if it's a trouble area.
Okay, just kind of soft. Generally.
Just basically soft, and then make a note of where it's at and then kind of come up with a plan.
Okay. So another item, I know that I constantly get asked by my wife to kill a spider and just bugs, they happen. How often are we treating for those? Where are we looking? Or, and also are we looking in our crawl space for that? And kind of how often should we be in our crawl space? It's not a place that I feel like we usually spend time except for at that initial home inspection, but it's another place that around here I see it comes up on reports a lot. So how often should we be in there?
I would say at least in my reports and what I see in the field, there's constantly crawl space issues. In a perfect world, I would go down there at least twice a year, maybe once in the winter, one in the summertime. I would honestly say go down there more if you are not terrified of it. There's obviously people like us that are happy to come out, take a look for you, but you definitely want to be down there more than you probably are already. And things to look for like rodent droppings, any potential access points. So usually the access to get into your crawl space, if it's, maybe pre-2010 home, you're gonna have the access on the outside sometimes, and that door usually isn't rodent tight. So making sure that that's a really nice tight seal and you're not gonna have anything, get in there, whether that is a rodent, a possum, a raccoon, anything like that. But yeah, you probably want to crawl around down there a couple times a year at a minimum. If you see ants, you're typically going to see them in your kitchen, something like that. There's a lot of over-the-counter traps you can just kind of set out to where they'll start to kind of all follow each other to there. And then again, just sealing up any small, tiny penetrations on the outside. But it's very common to start to see them in the summertime.
Yeah, and ants especially, like sugar ants, can be difficult to get rid of. So I think it's, I would say at every house that I've owned in rentals, it's one of those things where I'm always doing abatement for rodents and pests because once it gets out of control, it's a little bit, different of a scenario to deal with than just, starting and keeping it going on a monthly or quarterly or, whatever you choose kind of a basis. But it's not something you want to get away from you.
It's like you could say it about anything, but like just being a little bit preemptive with it really does help. So, if you make sure all of the openings in your crawl space are well sealed, now you don't have an infestation where you have to do new insulation and, all of the remediation that goes along with that. So it's just keeping up on the general maintenance and just maybe, thinking of how something could enter the house and sealing it up.
All right, it's fall time. Kids are going back to school. While they're gone, what are some things that we can do around the house, pay attention to, kind of get us prepped for moving into the really rainy season and winter?
Sure. A couple of things that I prioritize is probably exterior and like drainage. So making sure that the gutters are kind of clean as best you can. I know fall's kind of iffy sometimes. If you're in a really wooded setting, you're gonna have to clean them a lot more often, but at least starting with a good baseline, making sure they're clean, making sure your downspouts are at least 5 to 6 feet away from the house, that they're clean and clear, thinking about the upcoming colder temperatures. So getting, your hose bibs winterized, whether that's putting like a little igloo cover over them or actually shutting the water off and then draining them, depending on how your house is set up. Stuff like that, getting in contact with an HVAC contractor, having your furnace serviced if you haven't in the last year, just to make sure it's going to be up to snuff going into the winter, because the last thing you need is an emergency call when it's 30 degrees out and it costs more and people are really busy.
Yeah.
Probably stuff like that is what I would say.
We don't see it as often around here, but I feel like I'm starting to see it more often, and that's irrigation for just, say watering your lawn.
Yeah. So it's a great time to kind of start to winterize the system. Obviously, we got a bunch of incoming rain. So whether that's, having a landscaper out to do it for you, it's always nice if you have a contractor, if you're not familiar with it, to have them blow out the system and kind of winterize it, or going through the process yourself. But you don't want to leave it full of water going into the winter. The pipes are typically just PVC plastic, so they're really susceptible to cracking if they were to freeze. So it's something that either have a professional do or to do yourself.
Okay. And then speaking of, kind of keeping water out of those lines, I know sometimes when we're driving around in the winter, we see, those little covers on people's hose bibs, and then we see like the little foam pieces in the crawl space vents. Is that something that you would tackle in the fall, or would you wait further into winter for that? Or when would you start addressing those little items just to prevent pipes from freezing that are more kind of in and around the house?
Sure. I would say once we start getting temperatures around like the 40-degree mark, even especially at night, really start prioritizing things that could potentially freeze, because we get those dips, higher and lower. So yeah, fall's a great time to do that. And if you need to take a hose bib cover off to wash your car or, do something around the home, it's not the biggest deal. But yeah, I think that would be a great time to start doing that.
Perfect. One more question just about being in the crawl space is kind of protecting all of those water lines that are in there from freezing. Is there anything special that we need to do or be thinking about or checking on in the crawl space to make sure that we're not in that position of a burst pipe in the middle of winter?
Sure.
When it's freezing cold out and we don't want to be under our house.
Yeah, just making sure all of your piping is insulated. That goes for hot and cold, and all the way up to the wall. So where your plumbing, to your hose bib goes right up to the wall, make sure that's insulated. It's a common area that I see about this much missing, which is just enough to freeze. But making sure any exposed plumbing is, has got some sort of an insulation on it. That can be like the kind of gray pool noodle stuff that you typically see, or it can be wrapped fiberglass insulation. While you're down there looking, you may want to make sure all your subfloor insulation isn't falling down or anything. You can kind of push it back up, reorient it too. But yeah, the main takeaway would be all of the water lines. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation with us. I know when it comes to taking care of a house and everything that goes into it, we're really just scratching the surface of what's involved in that. And so, to have an expert like you that I can rely on, that clients can rely on, it's really invaluable. And so I really appreciate you being here and sharing that with us.
Absolutely, yeah, thank you. Today is just kind of like more of a general idea. I could talk at length about every little possible thing. It would bore you to death probably, every house I'm at is a little different, and sometimes it's nice to go a little more in depth with one item, but maybe not with another that's not necessary. But yeah, if you ever had any questions about your own house or anything like that, I'm more than happy to kind of give you my best idea of what it could be or anything like that. And just kind of go a little more in depth in regards to that item.
Okay, and like one last little thing that I'll chime in with, because I do this personally. Like I said, we tend to have this home inspection right when we're buying our house.
Yeah.
And then we don't think about it as much after the fact. If I'm going to be in a house for a long time, I actually have inspectors come back to my house every couple years, or go back to a rental of mine once a year, just to give me another checklist. I use them like a checklist of what things do I need to be paying attention to, where's the issues right now that I can take care of. And so don't feel like a home inspector is solely used for just that one time that you're buying a house. They're a valuable resource during your whole ownership.
Yeah, and that's another very common thing, is like a home maintenance inspection. So come out, it's very similar to your standard home inspection, kind of can vary based off of what you're looking for, but basically go through the whole home, try to approach anything that, hey, this is coming up soon, I would prioritize these lists, or these items first, and kind of go from there. Because sometimes you have people that maybe aren't able to crawl in a crawl space or aren't able to get in an attic, and I'm more than happy to do so and kind of give you an overall health of your house, especially if it's something that you haven't done in a while.
Awesome. We appreciate it.